Alright, I'm back with another Destiny video. This time, actually playing the game and actually testing out the new patch that went up yesterday. I didn't think I was going to bother, but, I decided to take a Yotai break and check it out. They did a whole lot of stuff in addition to just giving people a bunch of unstable cores. They pretty much reworked how the entire portal works in terms of power and progression and loot and all of that stuff, to the point where I mean it's I don't know if it's night and day compared to launch, but it's certainly way different. So it did seem worth checking out, even if it's not necessarily going to get me to go head over there and grind incessantly. A lot of this is better. I'll try not to go into just problems that the portal has as an entity, but that is certainly still part of it. They did a few different things here. One of the most major things they did was change it so all the difficulties just have a set delta. This varies depending on the activity. I'm doing GM stuff because I'm 400 whatever, and I think that's minus 25 delta. I think the highest it goes is minus 30, when previously you could get up to like minus 50 in some of the higher levels. This seemed like it was probably not going to be a good idea, per se, before this, where just getting locked at specific deltas and not being able to over-level stuff is kind of contrary to the idea of getting power. That may still be true, but I was expecting this to feel worse than it does. It's just the concept of like what a negative whatever delta feels like over the years has just been like so up and down that it's a little hard to keep track of. And I was surprised when I jumped into negative 25 and I'm like, oh, this is just really not bad at all. Like, I don't know if that was rebalanced around that delta figure, but like, I don't remember things feeling like this when I was doing GMs, probably at even sometimes higher deltas. So it really wasn't that big of a difficulty deal. Bosses have a good amount of health, and if you're doing matchmaking stuff, like dramatically increased void damage can like really screw you over sometimes if you're not careful. But in general, this does not really seem to be some sort of like, oh, well, now they locked us into like shitty difficulty and it just sucks to play now. That's not really an issue, at least from what I've played. I can't speak for the other difficulty levels, but this just wasn't really the bad feeling thing that I thought it might be. In terms of how power works now and like powering up your specific instance with modifiers, I mostly just ran matchmade stuff because they just put all of Reclaim in matchmaking, and I'm just like, okay, I'll mostly do that. But when you go back to solo ops or whatever, it's not based on like specific numbers anymore. Like whether you get a B rank or A rank or whatever is determined pretty much solely by the up-down arrows you put into any given thing. And so at baseline with GM, you log in, and they have stuff in place like locked loadout and things that are still annoying. But all I had to do was put on like a Bane modifier, and that was A rank. Like, it doesn't increase the power of the actual thing anymore. Like, you're not increasing the delta in the way those did before. It's just a much more streamlined version of it. But like, part of me wonders if like, if I'm putting one thing on to get to an A, like what is the point of this modifier picker system in the first place? Not that it was so relevant before this, but it just seems like this whole idea of like custom picking modifiers, and then for multiplayer ones having to fire team find for that, as opposed to matchmake. It seems like something they thought was going to be more fun than it is, like choosing your own challenge, when really everyone just did like the bare minimum of the easiest modifiers they could find to get, the whatever rank they needed. Now it's even easier to do that, which is like, that feels better. It's certainly better, but it's still kind of the same system of like, did this need to exist at all? Which is why I'm mainly just going to be like, whatever, I'll matchmake with these random ass modifiers. And they took some of the worst ones out, so matchmaking isn't quite as terrible as it used to be. I also note with matchmaking now, like doing stuff like Reclaim, where there's like some amount of mechanics involved, like more advanced than a strike. The people that are still playing at this point at least know the mechanics, so you're not really just dicking around with blueberries who are resetting the shapes you have to shoot or whatever, stuff like that. It's a more competent group of teammates. That said, sometimes there's like limited revives now on some of the modifiers, so you can get screwed over by a teammate who just keeps dying repeatedly, but it didn't get to the point where that was like, run killing or anything like that. In terms of how this works with loot and power progression, they did what I said to do a long time ago, which is just kind of dump loot out on everything, and also increase how much that gains your power. Between this kind of chest you get that has like plus power gear and then running a handful of portal stuff, I think I went up like 15 power levels almost, in like an hour or something. One of the things that changes now is that so many more of your drops are plus power gains, like no matter what, really. And that includes all of the bonus drops for any activity. So this does sort of motivate you to hop around and get like the thing with 4 drops as opposed to the thing with 1 drop, as that will increase your power faster. So this idea, it is, a way to motivate players, I guess, to rank up in power because it goes a lot more quickly now. And also we know that power is not being reset. So between those two things, it's like, okay, well, maybe I do want to get to 500 whatever and have a much better shot at T5s when Renegades hits, because it certainly is easier now. That's for sure. And, at 400 something, I'm getting mostly tier 4 loot, which is good. Stuff like Reclaim, they put in like a mid-break chest in there between each segment, which is good. So I think that's like 3 more drops than it had previously by itself. And it, that specifically seems better. They did up some of the rewards for other activities. It doesn't necessarily seem like just solo ops grinding is the way to progress now. Because with the bonus drop thing, you really do kind of want to seek out the things that have bonus drops. It's just, I think it depends on what it is, because something can have bonus drops and some things can't. But if something is just horribly inefficient or not going to be fun to play with randoms or whatever, you're still probably going to want to veer away from that. I've barely experimented with these like new dungeon encounter things or some of the stuff they threw into Pinnacle Ops now. I think one of the issues I have with loot now is that I wish I could just farm something specifically that was like only the new gear they just released. Like this is a pretty common thing of like, we have a bunch of new gear. You grind this thing and this thing to get that new gear. But what's happened is like they just have this wider loot pool that's like everything now. And you can target farm things occasionally when they come up with the new gear. And then Reclaim, I think, gives you like 1 guaranteed drop of the new stuff. But it's still not really where I'd like it to be. And I'm just not... the pool is just like really weird and kind of sprawling now. And focusing to get the exact new gear I want amidst this much larger pool of stuff is not the most fun experience. Like unless I'm really missing something about how to do this more efficiently, it seems sort of weird to me. I don't know if I'm ever gonna get the friggin' heavy crossbow. It's very funny that they introduced this entirely new weapon type, and like one of them's in the raid, and then one of them is like this rare drop from the new set of gear, and like they introduced this thing, with Edge of Fate. I haven't even used this new weapon type at all because I haven't bothered, super going on my way for it. It's just not something that normally drops, which I don't know. That strikes me as kind of funny. So like they did what everyone said they should do, essentially. Over time, they've really, kind of dumped in all of the loot that they needed to. They've really increased power gains, and the power gains actually mean something, given that we're not heading into a power reset. The unstable core thing, just adding a shit ton of unstable cores, that was good, because I could just, if I get something I like, if I want to pull something from the vault, I just automatically do it. No big deal. It was very annoying to manage unstable cores before. Again, I don't think they need anything for infusion, but here we are. It's kind of weird now that like getting gear and dismantling it is giving you unstable cores. So it is essentially giving you nothing because they made this change so quickly. The problem with all this is I just still feel so disconnected from the game now in its current state and the portal stuff. I just don't enjoy the process of grinding the portal at this point. I really tried. I did it for a number of months, and if this was like this from the start, I think there would have been some level of pushback or less pushback in terms of how it felt to grind the portal and how exhausting it was to get to X or Y milestone or X or Y tier. But it's just having this be the game more or less for 6 months, because there's not like week to week story stuff, and it's like, oh, there's one exotic mission that launches, you run a couple times, and then obviously Ash and Iron introduced Reclaim, which is not good. It's a good thing to farm loot from now because it's efficient, but it's not a good activity. And the rest of it is just made up of, old activities or solo ops we've already been doing for 4 months. And I don't know what's going to significantly change when Renegades hits outside of a couple of new activities to throw in there. All I want is like introduce a new activity or two. It's good. You farm that for loot. Higher difficulties give you higher tiers. Like that's the main thing you do. And this spread over all these different activities in the portal and like 7 different kinds of matchmaking and like 1 dungeon encounter and onslaught and like a solo. It's just, it's like diversity of content, but it's like just so, it's almost overwhelming in terms of like just the sheer amount of like random shit to do, that I would just prefer it to be the old thing. Like if they introduced Reclaim, it was 3 maps and it was a good activity, I would probably just grind Reclaim if I was getting a ton of specific drops from that update and those drops were good and were seeking out. I think the other problem is the motivation to get the loot now, because as long as the game is more or less the portal, this idea of grinding out, going hard for these tier 5s or whatever to just do more of the portal more or less is not terribly appealing. Like it just, that's always kind of how it was. But at least week to week, you were kind of getting new updates. There were kind of significant reasons to get new loot a lot of the time. Like the longer this goes, tier 5 loot is just like, it's the most hilariously power crept thing in the game. Like I don't know how you go past it. Just look at a piece of tier 5 loot and see like 15 enhanced icons and enhanced mods and like super huge stats, and it's just like where do you even go past here? And like once you have a handful of those that are good, it's just, it's negating everything below it. Like everything below 4 and 5 is largely pointless now, especially with how they just jacked everyone up in power to 300, where like tier 3 is tier 1 now, more or less. And it's just, the whole system is just sort of flailing around and not working. And the changes they made, I've said this before, like it doesn't really work as a coherent match to the way the system was designed in terms of progression and power. It's very clear they designed it the way it was before because they wanted to extend the grind, but they did it to a point where it was just beyond exhausting and people dropped out that way, or people just dropped out because they don't like the portal. But that fundamental thing is not fixed. And people are like, well, Renegades hits, like they're going to carve out the portal. They're not. The soonest we'd see any really, really significant changes there would probably be the next expansion 6 months after that. I mean, they can boost, power or whatever, or figure out different ways to do rewards like they've been doing now, but it's short notice, let's say, to have any big changes coming the next month and a half here. The focus is definitely going to be on Renegades. I'm curious how they marry Renegades as an expansion with the portal, which it's weird because the portal is like free and Renegades is not free, and the major update is free, but you can't really necessarily put Renegade specific stuff in the portal because the portal's free. So like Edge of Fate, like the expansion exists as its own little thing with these weird little activities that put you on mythic difficulty, which is completely outside of the range of even the existing ones in the portal has. Like it's so messy, and I haven't heard anything about making that more streamlined. Like this idea that the portal was going to be like this easy new player onboarding experience because everything is in one spot. Like, does anyone believe that is what's happening here? Like there's no way. Despite all this is a largely positive review of the changes they made. Everything they did is pretty much better than it was before. Power climb is way faster. You can get a lot more loot. The finagling with scores and letters and difficulty tiers and stuff like that is better. It is easier. It's more streamlined. I think the one thing that's bad is like with the way it worked with the numbers and the power and stuff, you could like get up to a point where you were farming something at level higher up and still getting tier 5s, but now you're forced into a delta. The delta's just not that bad though, so I don't think that's like the end of the world. But yes, obviously the larger problem of the portal is a thing, but in terms of making changes to the portal, I think they got it right, and they did what many people, myself included, were telling them to do with the portal. I mean, it took 4 months or whatever it's been, but they kind of got there eventually. It's just a matter of like, I still don't think this is going to fundamentally make people want to play the portal. I still don't really want to go back in and play the portal. I'm definitely going to come back for Renegades. I'm probably going to come back. I'm probably going to come back for Festival of the Lost, because if that's just like a specific thing we can grind for specific loot, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to do. I don't I don't want to have to balance bonus drops between like old strikes and battlegrounds and exotic missions and it's diversity of content, but it's also, it doesn't feel good to me. I'd rather just have an activity with loot and grind that activity until there's a new activity. I also like, and then with an option to do this other stuff if I want to. One of the things I've come around to is like, the portal doesn't need to die. The portal needs to be like a thing attached to the rest of the game, not the central focus of the game, which is kind of where you run into a lot of problems. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the patch, and I'm going to go back to Ghost of Yotei. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.